did take a few, didn't it?
Yeah. So we can go like that. Now it's definitely out of the frame. You're live.
That's just
There we go. Oh, to adjust this frame, we want to make sure we get our
you getting the whole.
chalice in there.
Oh, the chalice is very important.
Good idea. I don't know if I pour over. I'm so jacked about that.
Now, good morning, everyone.
And will you just check on the feed if anyone's sending it?
Absolutely.
Good morning. All right. Welcome to the UU live. Sorry, just a second. Yeah, get out of that. Welcome to the UU live presentation featuring Ian Wallace's hair.
Yep.
And
As always.
we are happy to be here again, happy to be able to bring these talks to your living rooms or kitchens or wherever you are listening. And we have people from all over the place tuning in, and we're honored to have you all here. Just saying yesterday, we have, in this crazy time, so much to be grateful for. So if there are any announcements, please send them in. I think at the moment they're the same as last week. Everything is canceled. But are there anything coming in from anyone?
Don't see anything. Do you see one from Matt there, Ian?
Announcements?
Yeah.
We're joys and concerns are starting to come in.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Well, if there are no other announcements, other than you can tune in next week for a presentation. Do you know what the theme is next month? Because I don't.
The theme next month, Victor knows what the theme next month is.
That's awesome.
Can't remember.
Join us next week and you'll find out the theme and more. Okay. With that, here's your opening reading.
Good morning. I'm Grace. Grace, for anybody who doesn't know me. I have a reading thinking about, we're going to hear from Ian later on his talk on truth, wild truth. And so I came across this interview with Reza Aslan, who's an academic who wrote the book Zealot, The Life and Times of Jesus of Nazareth. And it struck me when thinking about truth and literalism as it relates to the Bible. So I'll just read that for you all. Aslan says, as I continued my scholarly work, the more I learned about Jesus the man, Jesus of Nazareth, the historical figure, the more I became attracted to him. In fact, in a way, Jesus of Nazareth became far more real to me than Jesus the Christ. The man who 2,000 years ago started a movement and defied the will of the greatest empire the world had ever known and lost was someone I wanted to know, someone I wanted to follow. I guess the best example of something I had learned as an evangelical that I came to question would be the nativity stories, the stories of Jesus' birth that one finds in the Gospels of Luke and Matthew, which are beautiful, wonderful stories. They have a deep moral truth to them, but historically speaking, they're frankly ridiculous. That they are unhistorical to the extreme and so have to be understood less for the facts that they are presenting than for the truths they are espousing. In other words, the early Christian community understood that the facts of these stories were incorrect, but they didn't care because what we think about when we say history, or even what we think about when we say fact, would have made no sense to Luke's audience. For them, history was not a matter of uncovering verifiable facts. It was a matter of revealing truths. The truth is, the idea of literalism in the Bible is a very new phenomenon. In many ways, it's a product of the scientific revolution. When we sort of decided that that which is true is that which can be scientifically verified, that put into doubt the stories of the Bible. And what we now refer to as fundamentalism, this belief in the literal and inerrant nature of the Bible, arose out of the scientific revolution. It doesn't really trace itself back to the time of Jesus. On the contrary, the people in Jesus's time were steeped in mythology. They really did not make the same kind of differentiation between fact and myth that we do today. For them, stories of gods and goddesses and heroes were told not because of any facts that they revealed, but because of the truths that they revealed. Okay. So with that, we'll move into the chalice lighting. So love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. To dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, to serve human needs, and to help one another. So if we have any joys and concerns.
So we have one from Matt, or actually from Naomi, saying that she is joyful and grateful that she gets to Zoom with her teachers and classmates this week. Also have one from Sue, that her daughter returned safely and in good health from her adventure in Virginia. Ray.
Cameo says she's joyful for Matt because now she knows about the Strumbellas, which is totally mysterious to me. But
Last week he put a plug in for a song.
the Strumbellas, got it. Shannon Anderson has a joy for the leaves and flowers that are starting to appear.
Oh, I love that.
Hear, hear.
Spring.
She says it's a reminder that time goes on and everything recovers and adapts.
Yep.
Catherine Catherine Johnson has a concern for many of my nieces and nephews who are working in the medical field. Thank you, Catherine. I've got a joy. I reached out to Reverend Colley to get her feedback on my talk, and it was just so nice to touch base with her. And I know she's thinking about all of us. And yeah. She said she's doing well.
Oh, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
She's so great.
Catherine also is sharing a joy that she is learning to manage the stress in her life.
Good. That's a positive spin.
Chris Corfanta is sharing a joy. She says, thank you for doing these services online. You're welcome, Chris. Yeah. Ramona Stein is saying she's got a concern for all the college students in limbo.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Offering time for people to respond.
Anybody still typing? We'll give you a second.
Do a countdown. Just kidding.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Say when.
Go ahead.
We'll light one final candle for joys and concerns, felt but untyped. Okay. All right. And now we have a hymn.
Is it him?
Yeah, hymn. We now have a hymn.
Come sing a song with me.
Come sing a song with me.
Plug it in. Hold on a second.
Oh, you want to plug it in?
Yeah, let's plug it in. We got it. Here you go.
Saxophone version.
Technical difficulties. Whoa.
Woohoo.
Okay, we couldn't find one with lyrics, so I'm going to see if you can. Whoa, yeah,
So loud.
that's really loud. Hold on. Woo.
Sound check.
Promise this isn't the first time. Whew. Hot. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll give you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll sing a song of hope and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll give you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll sing a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll give you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll sing a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Okay.
And now for the story for all ages. This story was read to us a while back by Colley, Reverend Colley, and it fits in nicely with Ian's talk. The story is called The Beautiful Tiger by Christopher Buse. There once was a beautiful and powerful tiger. One day she was captured by a mean and cruel man who put her into a cage. The man kept the cage in the jungle not far from his house. Every day he would bring out a bowl of water and some food for the lonely tiger. Sometimes the tiger would see her own reflection in the bowl of water, and she would say, "My, I must be a beautiful tiger." When the man heard her say this, he would lie and tell her, "No, you are not a beautiful tiger. You're very ugly. You're a pitiful creature." Sadly, the tiger would believe the man. Some days, after she ate her food, she would walk back and forth in her small cage and feel energy and power moving through her body. And she would say, "My, I must be a powerful tiger." When the man heard her say this, he would lie and tell her, "No, you are weak and puny. You're a pitiful creature." Sadly, the tiger would believe the man. Then one day, when the man was nowhere around, a lion happened to walk by the cage. The lion saw the tiger inside and spoke to her. "Beautiful and powerful tiger, what are you doing lying about in that cage?" "Do not make fun of me," replied the tiger. "I know that I am neither beautiful nor powerful." "I'm not making fun of you," said the lion. "You are surely the most beautiful and powerful tiger I have ever seen. I am only surprised to see you lying here when you are clearly strong enough to break out of that cage." "You really think I could break out of here?" asked the tiger. "Quite easily, I should think," replied the lion. The tiger was not so sure at first. She had been told so many times that she was a weak and pitiful creature. But suddenly, it seemed that she could feel energy and strength moving through her body. She began to pace back and forth in her cage, and then, almost without thought, she leapt against the cage door, and it flew open without any resistance. Once outside, she seemed dazed. "That cage didn't even have a lock on it," she said. "I spent so much of my life stuck in there, and the door wasn't even locked." The lion looked at her with soft brown eyes and said, "Those kinds of traps don't need locks, for it is the lies we believe that keep us in our cages, and it is the truth that sets us free."
Thank you so much, Jules, for that. Okay, so I'm going to do a little reading, sort of a meditation. We'll have a reflective silence after that. So I found this. I was thinking about how our search for truth coincides with our search for meaning, and finding meaning can be especially important in times of hardship. So during this particular time of collective hardship, we can understand the mix and wave of emotions that we're feeling as grief. So David Kessler, who's done a lot of work on grief and the 5 stages of grief, was talking about this moment that we're all in and how that can be framed with the 5 stages. So he says, we are feeling a number of different griefs. We feel the world has changed, and it has. We know this is temporary, but it doesn't feel that way. And we realize things will be different. The loss of normalcy, the fear of economic toll, the loss of connection. This is hitting us, and we're grieving collectively. We are not used to this kind of collective grief in the air. We're also feeling anticipatory grief. Anticipatory grief is that feeling we get about what the future holds when we're uncertain. There is a storm coming. There's something bad out there. With a virus, this kind of grief is so confusing for people. Our primitive minds know something bad is happening, but you can't see it. This breaks our sense of safety. We're feeling that loss of safety. Understanding the stages of grief is a start to managing the grief. But whenever I talk about the stages of grief, says David Kessler, I have to remind people that the stages aren't linear and may not happen in this order. It's a map, but it provides some scaffolding for this unknown world. There's denial, which we say a lot of early on. This virus won't affect us. There's anger. You're making me stay at home and taking away my activities. There's bargaining. Okay, if I social distance for 2 weeks, everything will be better, right? There's sadness. I don't know when this will end. And finally, there's acceptance. This is happening. I have to figure out how to proceed. Acceptance, as you might imagine, is where the power lies. We find control in acceptance. I can wash my hands. I can keep a safe distance. I can learn how to work virtually. Kessler says, I've done work to add a 6th stage of grief. Meaning. I did not want to stop at acceptance when I experienced some personal grief. I wanted meaning in those darkest hours, and I do believe we find light in those times. Even now, people are realizing they can connect through technology. They are not as remote as they thought. I believe we will continue to find meaning now and when this is over. This is a temporary state. History tells us that. This is survivable. We will survive. This is time to overprotect, but not overreact.
All the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the land, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of love, come to me, come to me.
Okay. All right. Our speaker today is the one and only Steady Hands Ian Wallace. And good new nickname, Matt. And I met Ian when I was 15 years old, more than half my life ago, 18 years ago. We were at a camp for writers, and Ian wrote the most off-the-wall things in the world and expanded my view of what it meant to think about things outside of the box. And he has kept up that high standard of off-the-wallery and friendship ever since, and I'm a better person for it. So without further ado, Ian Wallace.
Thanks, Jules.
Yeah.
I hope this is just off the wall enough and yet still comprehensible. So, good morning. I'm really tall. Thank you. That is so kind. Okay. I've titled my talk today, Wild Truth, and it may take a bit to get there, but you'll see why, hopefully, by the end. To speak and be understood, there must be truth. Our words are a referential layer upon the existence of the world, encoding the sounds we make with meaning, passing messages pertaining to the real. For speech to function, the underlying truth of reality must be present. Truth is what allows our words to work meaningfully in reference to the real. The truth is a fundamental constituent of speech. Within our speech, the truth is the thing which we endeavor to communicate. We seek to speak the truth. Although we are at times mistaken, all the same, it is the truth underlying speech which allows us to convey meaning. There is, however, also the case of lying. It is the truth that underpins speech which allows a lie to be passed off as true. It is as if lies are floating upon a more fundamental truth, which they require in order to function. Today, I wish to further develop our conversation this month on UU's fourth principle, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. I intend to begin with a discussion of the aspect of how we seek to be responsible with truth and meaning in our human world, and will culminate the talk with an impassioned plea to free ourselves in this search. Our responsibility is to be true to ourselves and to be true to those around us. But there are times when dealing with other people when the truth can hurt. The cultural quirk of polite lying, sometimes called little white lies, provides a fascinating window into the way that the fundamental truth, which is the deep foundation of our ability to communicate in speech, influences our interactions. Slovenian philosopher Alenka Zupančič describes two levels of truth. And one is the underlying and constitutive truth, the ground of reality upon which we exist. The other is the more virtual truth, which we construct within our speech. These two truths will never match exactly. One is reminded of Jorge Luis Borges's fable of the perfect map, which was drawn to be the same size as the entire realm. This imperfect match between the fundamental truth of the world and our imperfect best attempt to communicate the truth to each other causes the truth to trip over itself, in Zupančič's words. White lies reveal that point of weakness where the truth trips over itself. When the truth might hurt someone, what is it about our cultural development that at times prompts us to tell the little white lie? Yes, I found it very interesting. This phrase makes a more central feeling we might have, like, that was boring. It masks a more central feeling that we might have, like, that was boring. And Zupančič proposes that the culture of polite lying allows us to protect the very being of the other from the imperfect expression of our words. If we were to say, I found it boring, we intuit that our words might be felt to mean, I find you boring, and we wouldn't want to make someone feel that way. So polite lies are a way in which the deeper fundamental truth of our existence short circuits the inherently contrived truth in our speech. The more fundamental truth might be better served by foregoing the expression of a hurtful fact or detail. With this as my starting point, I'd like to delve deeper into several different ways that reality's more fundamental truth, the level of truth about which humans might only have fleeting, enlightened glimpses, finds itself tripping over the awkward expression of truth in our speech. Myths themselves are situated where humanity finds itself incapable of sufficiently expressing the fundamental truth underlying our world. In my last talk, I briefly touched upon the idea that the sacrifice of the scapegoat and the practice of sacrifice to the gods in general was a development by early civilizations so that they were able to meet an underlying psychological need to violently purge the group of its harmful elements. Anthropological philosopher René Girard proposed that in the course of human evolution, rivalry created internal antagonisms that inevitably resulted in bloodshed. And these slayings acted to relieve social pressure within a group. As societies became more complex, this inherited pattern of violence to reestablish the peace and harmony of the community became ritualized. forming the foundation of religious practices of sacrifice. The myths about why the gods demand sacrifice can be viewed in parallel with the contemporary cultural production of white lies. Myth allowed us to put the real need for purging our harmful elements at a safe distance, sparing each other the hurt, placing it in the hands of the immutable gods. The practice of scapegoating today continues to function as a means of distancing our in-group from unpleasant truths. If we describe an invasion of poor people from Central America as threatening to cause the collapse of our society, we can hold ourselves blameless for society's problems. If everything is Donald Trump's fault, then we feel relieved of the responsibility to face the problems on our doorstep. Here, a line from William Blake rings out clear. A truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent. There is truth to the statement that undocumented migration is problematic for our society, but the deeper underlying truth is profoundly more complex than a simple binary of good and bad. The stark narrative which scapegoats immigrants allows us to abandon the responsibility for our wealth, which is built upon centuries of colonial exploitation. Likewise, blaming Trump for the prevalent pettiness, ignorance, and racism in our society might feel relieving, but he embodies these vices out of convenience for himself and his more avid supporters. The lack of empathy for the poor and underprivileged dwells at the core of a competitive, materialistic, alienating society in which we're all embroiled. Trump's personality and policies are disturbing, but scapegoating him allows us to distance ourselves from deeper truths. The problems in our society far predate his presidency. Responsibility for becoming aware and growing in compassion in order to deal with these issues falls upon all of us. Now, I'd like to look at the disjunction between the fundamental truth about reality and our imperfect attempts to convey truth through language in a broader sociological framework. Gloria Steinem said, "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off." Our human world operates within a framework of beliefs. Narratives, continuously retold, become our mental constructs. And these beliefs seem real enough to us, but under critical analysis, beliefs can fall short of a more nuanced understanding. This is why heartfelt beliefs are not the same as scientific knowledge, and why scientific knowledge is so challenging to convey in common language. Science is about interpreting frameworks of data upon the boundaries of what we don't know. Discerning meaning from scientific knowledge can feel infuriatingly difficult. Beliefs, on the other hand, are comforting and reassuring narratives that tell us what is going on without forcing us to engage in degrees of uncertainty. Most people in our society now operate with a belief that the results of science are good guides for our behavior, even if we don't feel comfortable interpreting what percent confidence the data shows toward the disproving of a null hypothesis. We believe that science holds many answers to life's more mysterious questions, and it's why right now we're engaged in social distancing to slow the spread of a disease that might otherwise overwhelm our hospital system. But despite the benefits we can see in the evolution of our beliefs, making a critical analysis of the ways in which we view the human world can be quite painful. The long development of complex societies is predicated on the proliferation of many confining and constraining beliefs. We're descended from bands of wild savanna primates. Just like every farm animal or pet whose ancestral roots are wild, the domestication of the human species is about the control and subjugation of our wild impulses.
In the case of humans, the control is more a matter of cultural framework. We are highly social creatures on the whole, and our domestication arises from the world of shared beliefs, which has served to stabilize and pacify our societies. Our beliefs are contrived truths, imperfectly referencing the deeper fundamental truth of our reality. These truths we believe about ourselves are greatly influenced by the dynamics of power. Over the years, societies have been stabilized by shared beliefs in God, shared beliefs in karma and fate, shared beliefs about the afterlife, shared beliefs about outsiders and other races, shared beliefs about the divine right of kings. Among the most fundamental beliefs we hold are those surrounding our gender. What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? Cultures have answers to these questions, and answers which serve to marginalize many individuals who live in fear that they are failing to meet the ideal of what it means to be a man or a woman. This is a painful truth. When we believe the narrative we're told about who we ought to be and find ourselves lacking, we surrender our wild power. I have felt this many times in my own life. The binary division of virtues and vices into traits that are feminine and others that are masculine are dichotomous truths of cultural contrivance. The variation of truths within one gender the variation of traits within one gender is broad and largely overlapping with traits in the other gender. And even when the kernels of truth behind our beliefs regarding gender are borne out biologically, think of the many ways that these cultural beliefs function to limit our freedom. A deeper, more critical look into the shared beliefs around gender norms reveals the ways that these beliefs serve to perpetuate systemic injustices. When women are expected to be gracious and nurturing, how far is the step toward their being exploited and underprivileged? When men are supposed to be steadfast and tough, how much of a stretch is it for them to be silenced and used as the tools of powerful interests? Today, numerous individuals are rejecting gender binaries, and this follows upon several generations of social criticism and activism surrounding the challenge of our beliefs about what it means to be men and women. Think about it this way. What if little white lies were the only feedback you ever received? It would be impossible to know how you truly fit into the world. For those who don't fit the traditional narrative of the gender binary, the pain of the wild truth about their personhood is something I can empathize with. Beyond the issue of gender, deeper truths about our interconnection and interdependence within the web of life are also uncomfortable for many of us to face. What beliefs help assuage us of our responsibility for problems relating to such issues as the production of industrial meat, the ecological assault on the oceans, and the ongoing exploitation of vulnerable people around the world? The wild world is incomprehensibly vast and daunting in its complexity. We might feel safer in a gilded cage, yet the freedom to discover oneself in the stillness of the wild can't be underestimated. If we come back to civilization changed, let it be. By living out a search for truth, we might see the walls of our beliefs for the illusions that they are, and more closely align ourselves with the cares and the needs of the world. In seeking truth, we give ourselves the freedom to love and thrive as only wild creatures can. We're supposed to share the basket.
Yeah. So
Tangible.
in the much shorter than Ian. Ramona sent out last week an address for those who would like to contribute to the UU offertory. We can put that up again, but for right now, it's you could send to the building here. The mail is still being checked. It's 1950 East Brundage Lane in Sheridan, or you can drop them off with Ramona, and her address. Actually, I have Bill's here, but you could just send them to the church here, or Bill shared his address as well, which is 706 Adair Street, which is right across from the junior high. So you can send them to either of those places. So just make sure it's care of Ramona Stein, who is our treasurer. So the virtual passing of the basket. There it is. Okay.
And then do we
Extinguish then closing, or is it closing then
I
extinguish?
think we do our conversation first.
Yeah.
Don't we? We do.
No, closing words and then discussion.
There's discussion.
Where's the closing words?
closing words first?
Yeah, then discussion, then
Okay.
extinguish.
All right. We're getting the hang of the order. Okay. I just have a couple words here as closing thoughts. So this comes from a piece David Brooks wrote called "The Moral Meaning of the Plague." And so he referred to Viktor Frankl. He said, Viktor Frankl, writing from the madness of the Holocaust, reminded us that we don't get to choose our difficulties, but we do have the freedom to select our responses. Meaning, he argued, comes from three things: the work we offer in times of crisis, the love we give, and our ability to display courage in the face of suffering. The menace may be subhuman or superhuman, but we all have the option of asserting our own dignity, even to the end. Okay. I think that's time for discussion.
Yes.
Bring Ian back up.
Okay.
Put him in the hot seat.
All right.
So
Let's see here.
we have a couple of people saying thank you and thoughtful, profound from Kabira. Chris Corfonta says she has much to ponder, and she hopes that you can provide your written talk.
Absolutely.
Mitch Kraft thinks that was very interesting,
Well, good.
and not in the
Not in like the facetious sense.
yeah.
Great.
Not
All
the
right.
sense that you spoke about it. I gotta say, I was thinking about something as you spoke. Have you watched the Truman Show movie?
Ooh, I didn't think about the Truman Show
It
as
just
I was
popped
writing
into
this,
it
but
popped into my head because this man lives in this world of white lies, basically. Like, just really niceties, really surface level. And then he has this one experience with this woman on this beach, and she tells him like a truth, like your life is a lie. They're lying to you, and it is something that is so profound that it sticks with him. And it's like,
and it
I
grows.
also thought of The Giver, like early on in your talk when you were saying precision of language. Well, that was boring. Doesn't mean you were boring. It's like precision. It just made me think of precision of language and, like the wild roots of our language or the wild roots of human truth, would be so precise.
So in the
Right?
story of The Giver, they're very precise with their language. They would never tell a white lie. They would only speak the truth to each other.
Yeah.
But
what they live in.
In the process of
Veil.
doing that, they really confine themselves to
Yeah.
very narrow ways of being.
And they veil
Yeah.
truths of the past, and they don't allow everyone to know about the past or the future or even the present. It's very interesting how even with precision of language, it doesn't necessarily free us. Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks like there's a request too for speaking into the.
So Jules was talking about the Truman Show. And if you've ever seen the Truman Show, or if you've never seen the Truman Show, this man is his lifetime is being recorded by hidden cameras. He lives under a dome that's a soundstage constructed for him, and all the rest of the world is watching a television show called The Truman Show, and his name's Truman, and he's basically living a lie. Everyone around him knows he's the star of the show, but no one tells him that. And so then there's this one experience he has where an extra who is not really supposed to interact with him feels compassion to tell him, you're living a lie, none of this is real. Then of course, like, they come and sweep her away, but that rift in his understanding of the world stays with him. And eventually he's able to escape. It might remind me a lot of the allegory of the cave. I was thinking about the allegory of the cave that Mitch had used, and thinking about that last piece where in the last part of the allegory of the cave, the man goes back inside the cave and he's blinded again, but this time by the darkness. And his compatriots are convinced that if he's blinded by the darkness, whatever was out there couldn't be good, right? Because the contrast is so great that he's no longer able to operate in the dim world of those shadows on the wall. And that if he were to try to haul any of them out there, they'd respond with violence and rather kill him than be removed from their world of shadows. Yeah. And I think maybe that kind of speaks to this idea of our contrived truths can be really comforting, even if we're exposed to the idea that there might be something much better for us out there, but uncontrolled. We might like the controlled world that we have, even if we know it's less true than, something else.
So a couple of comments here. Catherine Johnson says the reason she loves the UU Fellowship is expressed by Deepak Chopra, and it fits your talk. Walk with those seeking the truth. Run from those who think they've found it. Also, Robert Tilden said, when a poet writes a poem, it is open to interpretation. I now make my living in technical writing, and it is precise and clear, but boring and unreadable. Most writing lays somewhere in the middle. This is truth and open to interpretation. Comment to that if you feel like it. I also have one from Victor when you're ready.
Well, I think, and I hope like you take my view on, a critical analysis of human interactions as very much open to interpretation, because anything that is as complex as a human being, much less millions and billions of them, is impossible to pin down in space and time, right? So I do, though, think it's very important to do our best to work towards thinking how we might be wrong about things. A lot of what Mitch said last week stuck with me as I wrote this, and that idea of David Foster Wallace's, where he's like, I'm probably wrong most of the time, right? Is that shouldn't stop you from working toward seeking the truth, but should just inspire you to put even more effort into how you're triangulating discerning what your knowledge is at any given point.
Victor says, sometimes we have to challenge societal beliefs when they result in injustice. but to do so causes us to stand out in ways that result in criticism or worse. Care to comment? If you want, I can read it again.
Yeah, that's a great thought, Victor. So wondering, like, when we do end up putting ourselves on the line when we're asking about whether or not something that is happening in our culture or societally is fair or just. Yeah, it's very much a place of discomfort, right? And it's a really hard place to attempt to be in all the time. And I would say that it's certainly not something that anybody could maintain a healthy approach to if they were approaching it in anger, right? So, like, this is an issue for a lot of people, which is, issues of social justice for many people prompt them to get upset. And I think that having compassion for both people who are upset by injustices that they face or injustices that they see not being addressed, having compassion for people who are suffering is really important. And also having compassion for people who are, to just use the metaphor, trapped in a cave of shadows on the wall, where they don't want to look at ways in which their beliefs are harmful to themselves or others, right? Having compassion for people who aren't ready to suss out the ways in which their beliefs might be running counter to some deeper truths. And maybe starting with that compassion within oneself, because there's things that we're all wrong about. So I would say, I guess, Victor, like, what great question. And yeah, it would have to be like starting within oneself, right? Seeing ways in which you have compassion for yourself, and then that becomes your source of self-care as you move forward, doing your best to say what needs to be said in those situations where it really matters, which is hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Cameo sent in a comment. Yeah. Good response. Cameo thanks Grace for her words also, especially at the end. And she's not sure exactly the quote, but it's that we need to be overcautious but not overreactive. She sends her thanks.
Yeah, was it overly precautious?
Overprotect but not overreact.
Overprotect but not overreact. We do need to overprotect. Yeah. But not overreact. Yeah. Interesting. It's hard to do both.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. Thank you, everyone.
Extinguish the chalice.
We're ready to extinguish the chalice. By all means, if you want to hang out in the live chat, we'll leave it running for a little while here. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again, whether virtually or in person. I added that part.
That was a good addition. That's a good addition. Very temporal.
Bye. Love you all. Thank you. Chalice will not be unlit.